Can
Okay,
we
got
start?
it.
Can we start by telling us who you are, where you are, and what you try to do with your art form?
Sure. I'm Bill Payne. I play with Little Feat. I'm in Montana, about 20 miles from Yellowstone Park. And what I try and do with my music is share with others my experience. I involve influences that connect in various forms. Those influences are what informs my art, and whether I'm a musician, a writer, a photographer, anything. It's that I was just writing about Robbie Robertson and his passing. This idea of the confluence of influences and remembrance. Remembrance doesn't tie into what we're just talking about, but the confluence of what influences our art certainly does. So
Yeah, this the great Robbie Robertson of the band who passed away, and hold on a second. Did I lose? I lost my mic. Hold on a second.
okay.
What just happened?
Yeah, I lost you there for a second, then you came back in. So
Yeah, that's weird. Hold on a second.
yeah, no worries.
There we go. Okay.
God damn it.
Where did I go? Ah, okay. Okay. Where's the Yeti? What happened to the Yeti? This has never happened before. Sorry about that.
That's okay, no worries.
All right. And there we go. Yeti. Okay. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, uh, we are all remembering the great Robbie Robertson today, as we just learned that he passed away this week. And, the band is such a um, inspirational group of genre bending songwriters and master musicians. And in a way, Little Feat is sort of an extension of that energy in my mind, right? And you guys have kept the spirit going for, you know, over 50 years at this point, which is just
Yeah.
impressive and inspiring to me as a musician who has a band that is inspired by you guys and Robbie Robertson and the band and tries to further that connection between folk music, soul, rock and roll, the blues, funk music.
Yeah.
That's what I love about music is when you can merge two things that don't come together that often, right? You guys have
Yeah.
these acoustic ballads and you have these big New Orleans kind of funk dance party songs, and it makes total sense, and it always has.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And it's um, I'm writing a book right now called Carnival Ghost, and it's my life, but it's my life that intersects with Little Feat. But 1966, I think, was when Big Pink came out, and so it'd still be another 3 years before Little Feat um, became a band. But that's where things started to happen for me with that group was with that album. And then before that, we had God, it was the Olympics. Big Boy Pete. When I was in fourth or fifth grade. That thing was just. I listened to that record all the time. So there's a lot of cool stuff that being in a golden age of music produced. and why I think Little Feat's been able to last for as long as it has. It's always been about the music for our band. And I'm sure with yours too, by the way.
You know, Little Feat is one of those groups that I was just talking to my wife about this, sort of like Super Tramp for me, right? These bands that you've heard these songs growing up, your parents played them on vinyl, you heard them on classic rock radio, but you didn't necessarily know who it was, right? Little Feat never had maybe the name recognition of Led Zeppelin, Elton John, all these people that kind of came out of the 70s. And yet, so many people have been so inspired by you guys and have covered Little Feat through the years. I mean, just the catalog of covers on the song Willin', right? Which is, one of your um, touchstone numbers. I mean, Linda Ronstadt obviously, I think, put it on the map maybe, but like, I mean, the list is 20 deep of folks who've covered that, the greatest bands of all time. How does that feel for
That's pretty
you all
cool.
these years later?
How's it feel?
Yeah.
It's humbling. I have to say, yeah. I have heroes that are within that list, maybe most, if not all of them. And to know that what Lowell and I wanted to or foresaw this group doing, or hopefully that we're hoping we would be doing, which would be to add a layer of influence to the influences that were already hitting us. You know, so influences that go out come in. So yeah, and Richie Hayward, our drummer, he was playing with Robert Plant. Uh, uh, I saw Robert and uh, last year, I guess, maybe even earlier this year, for the Americana Music Awards, and Lyle Lovett was singing. I think he was doing well, and as a matter of fact, and yeah, just a really cool thing to be included in a what Keith Richards described to me in 1974. We were in this basement in Amsterdam, and the Rolling Stones came to hear us play. They came to hear Little Feat, and I'm down there in the basement going, "Oh, Keith, oh my!" And he grabs me, pulls me in tight. He says, "Oh, mate, we're all part of the same cloth." And
Mm,
what he was doing was saying, "You're part of the club, man.
yeah.
Your band is part of the club." And I realized when I was reading his book, A Life, uh, he was talking about being in a very similar situation, but he was with Muddy Waters and Little Richard. And he
Mm,
thought, if those are the cats, I must be one of the cats too. So that was what he was sharing with me, and I like to share that with people like yourself who are in a band. We
right.
are a part of that club, man. And we would never join it like Groucho Marx used to say. I never joined a club that would accept me as a member.
Yeah.
Um, but in fact, that's what we are. So it's a cool thing to be a part of that.
Well, I think it's always hard to not have some imposter syndrome if you're a creator, a writer, a singer, and you're one of the foremost rock and roll keyboard players of the last 50 years, according to Elton John. But you have to, I'm sure, question yourself all the time, right? Throughout your career, like, do I belong in this club? Like, I mean, just looking at who's covering that Willing song. You got Linda Ronstadt, obviously, Greg Allman, The Byrds, Steve Earle, Tom Petty played it live on this live record. Recently, Mandy Moore played it. I mean, it's like these songs that sort of have a life of their own over half a century. Um, you know, does it feel like these songs belong to you, or do they sort of belong to the universe at a certain point?
Well, they belong to the universe on that level that you're talking about, but they belong to me as well. I didn't record on the very first recording of Willen on our first album. That was Lowell, and I thought it was a caricature of a truck driver and a truck driving song. So
Right.
when we redid it for Sailin Shoes, I come down from Santa Maria, California to Los Angeles armed with a knowledge of Conway Twitty and George Jones and Floyd Kramer. And my what I brought to that song when we went in to re-record it for Sailin Shoes was that Floyd Kramer-esque piano. And for my money, we legitimized the song with Lowell singing in a more a less affected way, to sing the way he would sing brilliantly
Right.
on his own. And a really good arrangement on it, and that's the iconic version of that song, not the one on the very first album. So yeah, I own it too.
Well, for people who don't know, Little Feat sort of re-released or released these deluxe versions of Sailin' Shoes and Dixie Chicken that have all sorts of really cool outtakes. They have live versions. They have all these treasures that, fans of yours must be really excited to hear. And, if you go to that first track on Sailin' Shoes, the deluxe version, Let It Slip. I mean, it's like that song is such a jam. Like you feel like, you go to a dance club in the middle of Hollywood tonight. It'd make total sense. The young people, dancing their ass off to it. How did it feel sort of rediscovering some of these songs that maybe you haven't heard in 40 years?
What I actually wrote something about it, and with permission, I'll read you a little bit because you can say it a little better than I can talk right this second. Um, it was Richie Hayward and I. We were rummaging through the just the idea of the second album for us. And what I wrote was this. I said, what is striking to me is the absolute lack of inhibition Richie and I had, like two unleashed tornadoes crisscrossing each other's paths, gathering momentum that is unceasing and somehow, most importantly, disarming. There's an exhilarating tumble and pull to Richie's playing, and that evades somehow self-indulgence. Much of what I'm playing is the same unrestrained, let me see where the hell this goes attitude. This is the beginning of the band, a band finding its voice, speaking in tongues, emptying out the toy chest, not in search for anything, but in a mad dash for everything before adult supervision steps in and screams, stop. We were just on a tear. But the album itself, the album Sailin' Shoe itself, is a very restrained album, right? The songs don't have any jams to speak of. The playing is tidy and it works. I love the album. But what was surrounding that record was that energy I just described of being paid by a record company to go on and try things. And we did a little bit of that on the first album, but we were distracted on that first album with A, the fact that it was the first one, and B, that Russ Titleman, who I love, he's a great guy. He and Lowell had they were dear friends, and then they had a confrontation over the making of that album. So that was a distraction. So this one we kind of got past that, and we're just able to play. And that's the beauty of being in a band, as you well know. I mean, you might have songs you're going to rehearse for your gig coming up, but there's times when you just sit there, Z, and you go, hey, let's try this groove, or not even say anything. You just jump into it and see
Right.
where it'll take you. And that's the fun of being in a band. I mean, you can do it with other musicians, of course, but you're going to have that conversation with your band more often than not. So it's cool.
Are you guys playing a song like Let It Slip live these days?
Oh, you
Or
mean easy to slip? Yeah.
yeah, Easy to Slip. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, we are. We've been playing that. We'll certainly be playing it this fall when we do both albums. What we might do, and I haven't talked to the band about this, so this is maybe stepping out of line a little bit, but I might suggest on that tune that we have a little more of an extended area where we take it off a little bit, or the jam a little bit on it.
Right.
We haven't done that, but I could see that happening quite easily. It's in such a cool groove. Um, Scott Sherrard and Tony Leone, I should mention them. They are in our band. Scott was the musical director for Greg Allman, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Um, I was out with the Doobie Brothers on a tour, and I toured with those guys for 7 years up until about a year and a half ago. And so I met Scott on that tour, and then he wound up playing with us by a suggestion from our manager at the time um, to come in. This is when we were doing our 50th anniversary for the Little Feat, and Paul was dying. I mean, he was on the way out, and so we did the tour in the fall, and we had Larry and Teresa, Larry Campbell, Teresa Williams join us. But the last two shows were with Scott Sherrard. And on the very first of those two shows, Paul passed away.
Mm.
So that was a quite an event for Scott to step into that first and foremost. But then we went to Jamaica in January, just a month and a half before the pandemic hit, and we decided, yeah, let's continue this experiment called Little Feat with Scott Sherrard, and shortly to be followed by Tony Leone on the drums. And Tony used to fill in for Levon Helm, played with Chris Robinson and his group. So yeah, there's a lot of very nice ties in Little Feat, and musically, these guys are more scholars of our music than we are.
Yeah. Well, you guys came out of this sort of experimental world. I know uh, Lowell George, was in the Mothers of Invention with Zappa. You were possibly going to be in that band also. I think you were auditioning to be in, and then you guys kind of got together. It was around 1969.
Yeah, I was going to meet Frank. I called up his label, of which there were two, Bizarre and Straight. I called Bizarre, with the idea of meeting Frank Zappa and possibly auditioning. But by the time Frank got back from Europe, which was about a month later, I pretty much made the decision to just stick with Lowell. But I still went up to his house with Lowell and talked to him. And I just felt that musically, his music was way over my head. I don't think I would have been able to really play it. So I was happy to be with Lowell. But in the early going with Little Feat in 1969, we had some instrumental tunes. Dance of the Nubile Virgin Slaves, 10,000 Whips, uh, etc., that we played for Ahmet Erdogan, who was with Atlantic
Mm-hmm.
Records, ATCO. And had I known who Ahmet was, I would have been too embarrassed to play him songs. But he simply looked at us and goes, "Boys, it's too diverse." And we went back to the drawing board, and that's where, um, uh, well, Willen was probably already there, I got to say, but Truck Stop Girl, um, Brides of Jesus, Strawberry Flats, all those songs started to fall into place.
Yeah, because there was bands that didn't fit in any sort of pop radio friendly direction, right? And yet they had an audience like the Mothers of Invention. But I think what made you guys maybe more accessible is that you could tap into the sort of jazz, blues, funk world, but also in the country, what we would now call Americana folk singer songwriter world, right? That you could speak directly with songs that were very pared down, and that's what's so beautiful is the space in some of these songs, right? um I mean, even Roll 'em Easy, which is a favorite of mine, right? It's this very quiet, slow burn of a song, and you have this gospel kind of backing choir behind you guys. It's just beautiful, and you would never think that band would also have these big, you know, dance ready songs in their back pocket, right? It's like you can contain multitudes, which is my favorite type of band. I like playing, personally in like theater shows when people are seated to start and at the end they're going crazy and dancing and in the aisles, right? Because you can give them both. They can really listen and they can really have a good time. Because if you're only doing one thing, it gets old, right?
Yeah, it can for sure. And I've often said that Z, that to play in the band Little Feat is like playing in 10 different bands
Yeah.
because you described us. And so it was somewhat frustrating in the early going that we were not a hit band like say the Doobie Brothers, um, but we had our own thing, and it was tough to define who we were for people out there, for the record label even. They stuck with us, but it was kind of like, who are these guys? I mean, are they a rock and roll band? Are they rhythm and blues? Are they New Orleans? Where do they fall? We just took music uh, I keep using the word influences, but we took those influences and crafted them from genres, sometimes blending genres of music together to create and write music, which is the foundation of any great band, any great singers, uh, anybody that wants to do anything. You have to have a platform to perform from, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to write your own stuff. I mean, Linda Ronstadt, I don't think wrote any music, but she was a song stylist and uh, made a great career out of that. Bonnie Raitt, on the other hand, does write music, so there you go.
Well, I think you guys were a wellspring of talent. So you have uh you guys creating these great songs in various genres for people to select. Like it's like a delicious buffet, and
Right
and
on.
I think like Dixie Chicken for me is one of those records that it keeps coming around every few years into my psyche, forget about it, and then all of a sudden there's a song. I have a radio show here in LA on 88.5, and so every week I'm just collecting songs that hit me in a certain way, and I keep getting these songs into my playlists or into my radio stations that just hit me, and I'm like, God, who is that? Oh, it's Dixie Chicken, Little Feat again, because
That's
I
great.
I didn't I didn't grow up with you guys, and I should have a conversation with my dad about this. I was like, why didn't you play this at home more often? Even though I grew up with all the people who were inspired by you or who were around you, right? And so now 2023 is when I'm actually fully diving into Little Feat, which is really, kind of cool in a way because that's the beauty of music history. It's always there. You can always reach back
Yeah,
and find it.
that's true. And what Lowell and I used to call it were the connection between things. So if you like Eric Clapton, you might want to see who he liked, and that's the way your vocabulary, so to speak, keeps growing. So my applause to you for the way you're not only dealing with us, but just the way you're what's shaped your life. You're doing it in a very good way, I got to say.
Well, I think the cool thing about the internet, where it's a dangerous, dark place, but it's also a place of infinite discovery, right? And you guys re-releasing these newer versions of Sailin Shoes and Dixie Chicken, I hope that a whole new generation of folks can dive in and be like, wait a second, this is really cool, and it doesn't fit any category, which is the most important part. I mean, I think the song that I was really into yesterday, one that you wrote, "Oh Atlanta,"
Yeah.
which is there's a really cool version off that "Waiting for Columbus" live record, which is considered one of the great live records of the last 50 years. There's just a lot of heart in these songs, a lot of poetry, and you write beautifully, about a lot of stuff. But can you tell me a little bit about that song?
Well, the first tour we did was in 1970, technically. We were at the Reflections Club in Cincinnati, Ohio. I think it held about 1,000 people there, and we did 2 nights, uh, Christmas, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, 24th and 25th. And so they're all singing Ohio football songs because they're going to go to the Rose Bowl to play Stanford.
Uh-huh.
When we arrived at that airport, the airport was not in Cincinnati, it was in Kentucky. And
Right.
I was watching these people as we were leaving the airport. There was a line of cars that were lined up just watching planes take off. And I go, is this all there is to do around here? I
Yeah.
thought it was kind of strange, uh, being a kid from California who was a surfer. And I didn't know how to dress for the winter at all. So that's where Atlanta was born. It was born in that first tour of Little Feat. So it starts off like there's a place down Ohio, got a place in Kentucky right down near Ohio, where you can watch those planes at night. People lined up to watch each flight. That's where that came from.
And you were born in Texas, right? But then you moved to California when you were about 2 or 3.
Yeah, I was born in Waco. Yeah,
You start playing the piano what age?
I'd say around 5. Started taking lessons. A little before that, maybe 4 years old, or my mother played me a song called "Vayo con Dios," and there was music that went with it that she played for me, and it was on the cover was, um, oh gosh, now I can't think. At any rate, two luminaries were on the cover. Mary Ford and Les Paul were on
Mm.
that cover, and I still have the music in my piano bench, and that's kind of the way I got started. I had a great teacher named Ruth Newman who told my mother when I was taking lessons, she says, I'll make sure Bill knows how to read music, but let's not take the magic out of it for him,
Mm.
which is, in other words, let him play by ear, let him explore the instrument, let him take it where he wants. Let's let's make sure that happens. And I'll make sure he knows about Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Chopin.
Yeah, some of your style reminds me of Ben Montench, like, and what he's done.
Oh, I like that.
And he plays around here in LA a lot.
Yeah,
And just sort
yes.
of these local shows, and you know the Heartbreakers, and Tom Petty's group, um felt like sort of maybe the last extension of the 60s 70s rock and roll age, and I was able to see them at the Hollywood Bowl like 3 days before Petty passed away for the first time. It was the only time I was able to see him. It was a wedding anniversary present. And, you know, my hope, and I've said this before on this show, my hope is that the new crop of bands, a lot of them creating what I think we call Americana right now, mixing a lot of these American roots styles together, rock and roll, soul, funk, blues. It's our job to like make the new classic rock, you know?
Right.
It's not just rock, it's creating music that actually says something and has um songs that last, right? These songs that you guys created, we're still listening to them 50 years later, right? That
Yeah.
matters. Like that's a
It
really
does.
cool
And
thing.
you said it earlier though, which is a song like "Oh Atlanta," but a lot of them they have heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're writing from the heart, then there's somebody asked me, "How do you keep Dixie chicken fresh? How do you
Uh-huh.
keep it from played it 100,000 times? How do you give life to it each time you play it. I said, what do you do when you sing happy birthday to somebody?
Their eyes light up.
Sing it from the heart. Start there, and the rest will take care of itself. Um, yeah, that's the job we have. You and I both have as artists,
Yeah.
is to find our voice, and in finding our voice, uh, share it with people, and if it's meaningful, other people will go, "Thank you, Z. You really
Right.
came into my life at a point when I really needed something to lift me out of the funk I was in, or um, I was feeling really cool and good about life, and you just extended that
Yeah.
immeasurably by what you provided. That's it's an obligation to the art form and to our talents that we have, and to accept the fact that we do have talent. Doesn't make us better than anybody,
Right.
but acknowledge that you have a voice, and you're given that voice to do something with it, and take it the way Brahms took it when he heard the footsteps of giants, which were Beethoven, Bach,
Mm.
Mozart, and Haydn. He took them seriously, and he thought, well, what do I have to do with coming into this, which is something you alluded to earlier? Why am I? Uh,
In
do
this
I think
club.
enough of myself to put myself in the same context as if you're speaking about musicians? You might want to mention Robbie Robertson or Levon Helm,
Right.
um, Fats Domino, Ray Charles, Little Richard, on and on. Yeah, do I deserve to be in that crowd? Well, maybe maybe in a way you do. I mean, I think Little Feat does, and uh, because of what we've done. I don't say we sound like those cats or that they sound like us,
Right.
but it's I feel the same way about Beethoven and Bach and Scarlatti and music that's lasted. I don't uh, that stuff lasts because there's something there that
Hmm.
attracts us to that paradigm they set up. Um, I don't know what will happen with most of this music from this age, but so far, as you said, 50 years is a pretty good start,
Yeah.
and so we'll see. But yeah, the human condition does not change that much. You
Right.
know, all the love, hate, everything in between. Everything surrounding us, what the technology does, but uh, the basic what was a song from Casablanca? That stuff's always going to be there. Uh, that thing of people, when people fall in love, or when they fall out of love, when they get
Right.
hurt, uh, when they want to dream about things. Those are the big subjects. You can tackle them any way you want, put them in your voice, and they're going to
Hmm.
resonate with something, guaranteed.
What I like about a song like Dixie Chicken is the relationship between the instruments and the vocal, right? There's a lot of like playful almost like they're having a conversation. The guitar and the vocal are mirroring each other. Your organ and your piano are sort of pushing the train down the track farther, farther and farther. And um, I think I think maybe, the Waiting for Columbus is so powerful because maybe Little Feat couldn't fully be um captured correctly until there was a live record. You know, I've heard the same thing about our group Dust Bowl Revival, and I've been very proud of some of the studio records we've done. But people are like, yeah, but it's just different when you see the energy in the room, and
Yeah,
um, I think it's very difficult to capture that raw power when you have a crowd feeling the music and you're on stage having that lightning go between the vocals, the instruments, and the audience. Do you still feel that energy when you play live today?
absolutely. And I'll lay one other thing on you too, with because it's a great subject you're bringing up, and what I've had with several musicians over the years, which is how do you how do you how do you get that cross between what you play in the studio and what you play live. A lot
Right.
of it is tonality because you're hearing things bounce off the wall, whether you're in a club or if you're playing outdoors. It is certainly the crowd as well. And with regard to the audience itself, see, I always I discovered this like quite a few years ago, but I started to take it more seriously as I thought about it. I created an audience for myself when I'd be in the studio. Say I'm working on with Bob Seger, and the song is Hollywood Nights, which just was one of those barn burner songs. Well, I'm not in there to audition my playing. I'm the track has already been cut, so what am I going to play on piano? It's just going to be full, flat out rock and roll.
Mm,
And I'm choosing like if it's a janitor in the studio, there's my audience.
yeah.
If it's the guy behind the control room, that's my audience. I don't care who it is, but I want to. I call it lifting lifting what you're doing to performance level,
Right.
which at the end of the day is not going to be any different, nor should it be in terms of what you'd play in front of 10,000, 60,000 people or 100 people. It really doesn't matter. You're looking for that performance. And so I think that's what stymies musicians sometimes is they don't, it's not a matter of taking it seriously. It's a matter of that thing of, wow, am I really there? Do I really know what it takes to play this? The
Mm,
only way to do it is to commit full time to it. I mean, like commit fully to what you're doing and
mm,
bring it up to performance level. There is no difference. There shouldn't be any difference at all between what you play at a club, other than the sound, and what you play on that record. Try it next time and see if I'm right.
I think the thing that drives me nuts is when you lay down a track, it's you're capturing a moment in time, right? This is the tempo at this time we think this song should be at, right? And then 6 months later, when you've been playing it on the road much faster, you listen back and you're like, this is totally wrong. We did it so slow. It makes no sense, you know?
Re-record it. You know that's
Yeah.
some another good point you're bringing up, and that Little Feat fully embraced. You know, when you listen to jazz albums, they've got this is version one, two, three, whatever.
Right,
They'll
right.
have the same song several albums. We adapted the same and adopted the same mentality precisely for what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's
Also, as
smart.
younger players, we weren't sure of what we were doing. It was sort of the terrain was new. I didn't grow up recording in a studio. It took me a while to kind of figure out where we were. I'm better at making quicker decisions. It still doesn't mean that you might not do the opposite and say, "Hey, we were just on speed that night, not literally, but just
Yeah.
you're up there way too fast, and the groove will might sit better at this tempo. Pull it back a little bit, that kind of thing. But unless you're trying to create a record for a that's going to be playing on the radio, which doesn't happen very often anymore, I don't think the restraints that were there in place back in the day are they're not there anymore. This is like, how do you reach an audience and how do you uh, convey what your music is to them? And I think it's fair game to say, hey, look, you know, yeah, this song, and I love the name of your band, by the way. This is
Oh,
what we were
thank you.
doing a year ago, and here's what we're doing now. Dig it, you
Mm,
know, boing.
yeah.
I think it's fair game.
I love the keyboard work, especially the intro on a song like Long Distance Love from the last record album, 1975. Is something like that improvised on the spot, or do you actually script out that whole sort of almost orchestral beginning?
You're talking about the thing that we when we re-recorded "Long Distance Love" with the new
I think
band.
so. Yeah, it has this really
Yeah,
beautiful kind of intro from you.
yeah, it was improvised, and it didn't take me but a second to figure it out. Um, it
Show
just
off.
yeah, I know I am a show off. I'm just, but it's to me, music is a conversation. So if I sit down, I'm at my house. I don't know if I can move this thing or not, but I've got a piano here. So if I'm just saying, we're gonna play, you know. I just play, man. It flows out of me like I hope sometimes when the words hit as a writer, you sit down
Right.
to write. Uh, like the description I made of Richie and I in this, we weren't even in the studio. We're just rehearsing someplace. But that those the ideas of two crisscrossing tornadoes
Yeah.
going at each other, uh, staying away from adult supervision, that kind of thing, till they start screaming, "No, stop!"
Yeah.
It's
But you
just
guys
it's
have
just
you guys have had to, endure some pretty tough losses, throughout the years, and you've somehow um recovered and put the train back on the track so elegantly. I mean, obviously, you lost, you know, Lowell very young. And um, did you think that maybe Little Feat would just sort of be a part of your history and then you'd move on to other things?
I did at the time, and um, when we put it back together in 1988, there's a few people, more than a few, both in the media and without, that said, "Look, you know, 10 years ago or whenever it was I think 79, 80, I'd said in People magazine, they go, you said without Lowell George, it's not Little Feat." I
Yeah.
said, yeah, I did say that. And that's what I believed at the time. And I've elevated and have grown into this mode of thinking. And so I said, it's called evolution,
Yeah.
you know. So you evolve into things, and uh, I think keeping keeping the music uh, true to the values of what the band are. That's not as tough as it might sound because we play so many different styles. But um, I took my impetus from a 1966 again. This was with the Yardbirds. I went to Pismo Beach, California, at the Rose Gardens to hear Jeff Beck. Well,
Mm,
Jeff Beck wasn't playing that night, but the guy that was playing was Jimmy Page.
mm,
And I went, wow. I was pissed off. I went, I didn't know who Jimmy Page was,
right.
but it was unbelievable. So when we were putting Little Feat back together, I said, you can't replace Lowell George. We're not trying to replace him. Does our music still resonate without him? But knowing that he's embedded in that music, and the answer was yes. Was it
Yeah.
going to translate to everybody that heard it? No, but nothing does. When we did Dixie Chicken, there was a review of our album that goes, all the songs sound the same. I go, okay, great. Next. You can't do anything in this life where people go uniformly, oh, that's great, or that sucks. There's always going to be somebody that thinks, something's okay, something's not. Uh, I'm not playing to those people. I don't denigrate them either. I'm just saying, uh, live where you want to live, but there's a lot you might want to open yourself up to in this life. And being that we inherently already cut ourselves off by uh, talking ourselves out of far more things than we talk ourselves into, uh, that's the human condition. So I like talking myself into things, and if this thing didn't resonate, you and I would not be talking about it. And your questioning and comments have been very eloquent, Z. I mean, so obviously,
Appreciate that.
I talk to a lot of people, and so I get it when somebody actually gets what we've done and what we're doing, and you certainly do. So thank you for that.
Well, I think, you guys have also had to endure the just economic realities of the label system, you know, obviously not having some sort of big transformative hit, right, in your first few records. Warner Records, they're like, wait, what are we supposed to do with these guys, right? And then basically I read that you guys would sort of record the records, and then you guys would all sort of have to play in other bands, and it's almost like the existence of the band was almost always in question, whether or not it could survive, right? Because back then, if you didn't
Right.
have a gold record, that's it. It's like you would be cast aside. And then years later, the records sort of rose to the top, you know, with Waiting for Columbus, and then people rediscovering Dixie Chicken. Are there bands that you played with? And obviously you said the Doobie Brothers, that sort of really helped shape you as a songwriter and as a musician the most?
Not so much. Well, let me back that up. That's a great question. I don't think anybody's really put it to me like that before. Um, I don't know that anybody shaped me as a songwriter so much, but playing 6 years with James Taylor was a real eye opener.
Oh,
I
cool.
love James' music, and I felt an affinity to him as a human being, and loved his songwriting, loved his just approach to music. Uh, he's a very, very vulnerable guy when I first met him, and he's just one of those guys. The first one I really witnessed that survived the the downfall of a lot of other people, which were too many drugs, too much alcohol, etc.
Yeah.
He came through that, and so I admire him greatly for that. Um, but in terms of songwriting and that, I think I just take the normal course that most people do. I put more emphasis on, and I've never worked with him, but Keith Richards, let's say, with the guitar style that he plays,
Mm,
kind of shaped a lot of what I would play, would say a Wurlitzer
mm,
in the studio, or playing live with people, playing rock and roll. Some of the Keith Richards type of licks that he would play. Do you remember so they're moving, they're not like straight
right.
shots on a G board. You might be that kind of thing. And but yeah, a little Richards piano playing, some of the really early Elvis stuff. Those kind of things began to shape who I was as not only a player, but as you said earlier, with the intricacy of the playing that went along with Dixie Chicken. Um, I I've written 20 songs with Robert Hunter. I like to think that I want to make my music as interesting as Hunter's lyrics.
Uh-huh.
You know, I've always felt that way.
Do you believe that there is a real, how do I put this? You've been in the presence of obviously what many people would consider geniuses, right? People with a supreme gift, that can be a curse too. I think sometimes people can't experience a full life when they're so tapped into some otherworldly force. And obviously, a lot of folks, didn't make it out of the 60s and 70s. Genius level people that you wish could have been around today for people like me to see. Do you feel like there was a certain person or people that you were in the presence where like this is they're connected to some otherworldly force?
Yeah, I mean, Jimi Hendrix was unbelievable as a player, and it was just a short burst with him too. I mean, it
Do you
didn't
see him
happen
live?
for. I did. I saw him. He was in Europe when I was there in '67, I was too afraid to go to the gig in London to hear him play. So when I got back home, he was playing at the Earl Warren Showgrounds in Santa Barbara, and I, because I was on home turf and felt a little more, uh, uh, relaxed or whatever, I went and heard him there. And then the second time I heard him was also in Santa Barbara, but it was outdoors. He had his back to the audience. He's standing ramrod straight. And a few months later, he's gone. So, I mean, I don't know. I was happy to be able to witness him. Lowell George was one of those guys, too, that just, as a mentor, very early going of the band, I felt he was tapped into something that his phrasing was genius to me. As a singer, as a songwriter, get away with lyrics. That's something in my book I want to write about. I'm not there to denigrate Lowell George and his fall. I want to show who he was as exactly what you're talking about.
If you could bring him, if for some reason he could come back for a set, what would be the first song you'd love to hear him sing with you guys again?
Wow, I don't know. Trouble. I I Fred Tackett is in our band, and he was out on the road when Lowell passed, and I was in Los Angeles at the time. But we both have dreams about him. I dream about Rick and Paul as well, Paul Barrera as well. But yeah, it's just as the dreams go, it's not so much what he would sing. It's like, where were you? I thought you
Yeah.
were gone. And it turns out there's this guy that I was in a band with in the Santa Barbara area, who we all thought passed away in 1968. And his tombstone says he passed in 1970 or something like that, or 69.
Uh-huh.
And so was he like, did they put it wrong on the tombstone? Or did he disappear for a year or more? That kind of thing. So you just never know. It's just crazy stuff.
All right. You could put together your own fantasy dream band. Okay. Who would be the instrumentation, dead or alive? Anyone you want.
Yeah, well, I think on drums, I like to play with Elvin Bishop. I mean, excuse me, Elvin Jones.
Mm,
Played with Coltrane, all those guys. And, I like to have on sax Wayne Shorter.
okay.
Um, Bass, got so many great players. Abraham Laboriel on bass would be fantastic. Um, this would just be for being able to just sit and improvise with these people. Not we would gravitate towards some form of jazz, I'm sure, but it'd be instrumental in any case. And and that's the thing. So if you were doing like Little Richard kind of rock and roll, you'd want Earl Palmer on the drums, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the way my dreams work. It's like that multi
Mm-hmm.
thing, the way you described it earlier. It's that's the way dreams are meant to be framed. Is how big is your dream? You know.
I wish that there was a way, you know, there was a little chute where you could kind of slide down into like 1955, where my grandparents would just go into New York and see a movie, and then they go see Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong just playing in a club. And it was like, yeah, I'll get a couple drinks and then head home. That was just like a nice
Exactly.
Friday evening. Like, man, that's so unfair that I couldn't see that.
Well, you might wind up seeing it depending on how things go in the future with music, and if we're not all replaced by artificial intelligence, which I don't think will happen immediately, but it's going to happen on some levels, and already has. But I think what I tell people on that level of intimacy that you're talking about with the arts, that is not going away. I don't care if there's artificial intelligence or not. People are still going to want to hear um, somebody that can really play the piano or sing, or a group that can play. They're going to still want to see that. They may not be in the 60,000 range or 60 people. I don't know. I don't have any clue as to where all that's going, but I can tell you that just the way you described it, of going into a club to hear somebody of the level that you're talking about, which is Ella Fitzgerald,
Hmm.
or I went to a small place and heard, um, gosh, it's like hearing Mose Allison play or
Hmm.
and sing, that kind of thing, or going to a small club and hearing the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I don't know. I mean, you
Right.
just get blasted out of your seat. Um, um, I don't think that stuff's going away. I think people, artists will always want to create. Um, they have to create. It's not that they want to, they have to. Audiences don't have to do anything. If you can't, what's the old adage? If they're not going to show up, you can't stop them. But on the other hand, if you have something that resonates with people, they're going to want to hear it. And so uh, that's the continuum that we've been talking about throughout this conversation. It's just that what where do those lines go out, and who they intersect with? There's always an audience. Whether if you're just in a room playing by yourself, yeah, you are playing for yourself, but there's that thing that known or
Mm.
unknown, seen, unseen, that's there. That is who are you playing it for beyond yourself? And
Right.
that's that part of your ego that goes, God, I wish somebody could hear me doing this, and boom, the spell is broken.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Was there a concert when you were a kid that you saw that sort of made you go, I really want to do this? Not just like, oh, I want to play piano because my mom thinks I should play my piano. Was there a concert where you were like, wait a second, this is important. I want to do that.
I I never put it in those terms, although probably should have. My first band I auditioned for was to play drums after my teacher passed. And I played piano, by the way, maybe in the beginning a little bit for the adult thing, but I quickly gravitated to my own thing when I discovered what the piano actually meant to me, which was a refuge
Hmm.
and something that I could interpret what was outside the walls of my house and try and bring that back in. So as a visual artist, I would try and replicate what I saw at the beach, whether it was the waves crashing, the seagulls, the spray off the waves. When I sat at the piano, what did that sound like? Um, so in terms of bands, the first band that I really got caught up with everybody else was the Beatles. Um, but I wasn't so sure because they didn't have a keyboard, at least at that time, if ever, that I would have thought, how do I how would I blend into something like that? Uh, it was just it happened on a more I literally stumbled on this piano and picked up the piano lid and started playing it in the middle of auditioning to play drums. And they go, wait a second, you play the piano? I go, well, I guess. And I said, forget this group. We got another group down the street called the Debonaires. You're going to play piano, or you're going to play keyboards in that group. And that was when I was age 15. I'm 74 and I'm still playing in bands. I just lost your mic again.
Is there a show or a festival that you've played in the last, several decades where you're like, this is the biggest, most insane thing I've ever played? Like your rock and roll god moment?
Well, I tell you this. I mean, there's a lot of them. I told you about the Stones coming to hear us. Bob Dylan was at the um, the Bottom Line in New York. And when I met him, I was well, it was Phil Lesh, and Dylan was playing on that gig too, not with Phil, but his own band. And I wanted to introduce him to my son, and Dylan walked in and goes, "Bill, you remember the Bottom Line?" I go, "How does Bob know my name?" And yeah, I do. You were like right, just center right, uh, on your side of the scene, or my side, center right, and you scared the hell out of me. And other than that, Chris Staten at the Santa Barbara Bowl, who played with Mad Dogs and Englishmen, I could see him at the very top of the hill, grooving to our music. I went, that is just unreal to me. I mean, I love Chris Staten. Uh, to see him up there bopping the little feet was just wow. Or seeing Jerry Garcia on the side of the stage, checking us out at one of the gigs we played with the Grateful Dead. Um, there's a lot of those big moments that you just think, well, this is what I've worked to do, and to see it unfold like that, you're just like, this is why we have those dreams, you know.
I had this like really vivid dream years ago where I was playing this little bar in Culver City, and for some reason, like I looked over, and in the corner was Bob Dylan and Tom Waits, and they were both watching our show.
That's pretty cool.
It was like Nighthawks at the diner. They were like having like a drink in the corner and being like, "Yeah, this is pretty good."
That's great, man. That's cool. I
Well, I appreciate everything that you've created, and if you were to play a song, you know, for the last time, let's say you were um, about to drift into the next world, and you could play one Little Feat song on your way out, what would it be?
no, I don't know. It's a great question, but I wouldn't know what to do.
Maybe you
Hopefully
have to put on your
everyone.
Sailin shoes. You know, you have to put on the Sailin shoes.
Yeah, maybe Failing Shoes. Yeah, that's a good one. There's just so many songs. You know, also with life and death, how you feeling at that moment? You know, it's. I just have to. It's like a lot of your questions were centering on something singular,
Right.
and my overall attitude is like, do you want to have mashed potatoes, or do you want the kimchi? No, whatever you're after.
Or kimchi
And I'm like,
potatoes.
the kimchi potato. So I think in these broader terms. So it's not a bad question. It's a wonderful question, in fact, but I don't know how to answer it because it's not the way I think.
Well, I
But
think,
thanks for I got to get rolling here, but thanks for the
yeah,
conversation. It's
yeah, man. Well,
extraordinary.
we're looking.
I
I'm
hope
looking
I get
forward to
the
seeing
chance
you
to your
guys.
band.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we actually had the same agent for a while, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
But I think it'd be a cool combination one day with Dust
Yeah.
Bowl Revival and Little Feat in one place. I think it'd be a really cool
I
combination.
like the
I'll
sound.
I'll I'll
I
try to
really do.
manifest it somehow.
There you go. Please do. That'd be cool.
All right, man. Keep up the good work.
Well, do. Thanks again, Z. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
man. Later.
Adios.